They weren't supposed to be here when the sensor technician aboard the Zarnathi Dreadnought Vueler reported a human warship on long-range scans. His voice didn't crack from confusion. It cracked from raw, unfiltered panic, not fear, not concern. Panic, as if he had seen the Grim Reaper himself reach through the void and point a cold, skeletal finger at their ship. Commander Kreisel had dismissed it at first. Another glitch, another sensor. Ghost, the human fleet had been pushed back 6 sectors from the Eltrax void. They couldn't possibly have made it this far and not undetected. Then the second report came in, then the third, and by the time the 5th ship in, the Vanguard confirmed the same signature, an old Terran battle cruiser. Class no known transponder running. Cold but powered. He stopped speaking. No orders, no logic. Just silence, because Crickle knew the stories weren't stories. The humans weren't just violent, they were unpredictable, relentless, psychotic. Some claimed they didn't just fight to win, they fought to destroy, to break, to unravel empires by force of will alone, and they had a reputation earned, not in numbers or advanced technology, but in psychological warfare, stubbornness, and what the Zarnathi called the dying laugh. It was what made them truly terrifying. The Terran would smile, smile as they bled out in fire, dragging enemies with them, laughing into the void. The last war 60 years ago had ended with a silence so loud it echoed across 5 quadrants. The humans didn't sign treaties, they didn't negotiate, they simply stopped. And that made the galaxy even more afraid. Now, as the vast Zarnathi Armada, over 3,000 ships strong, hung in formation over the burnt remains of the Growlian colonies, the echo of a single human warship's signature hit them like a sledgehammer. Fleet coordination collapsed, command lines fractured. Some captains gave orders to reposition. Others turned their ships away, stammering half-lies to their crews about a tactical retreat. Some went quiet altogether, frozen in place, and far beneath all that chaos, in the command ship's lower deck, a young recruit named Thake stood beside the observation panel, heart slamming in his chest. He saw it, a distant shimmer, the black, faint, low-profile, old Terran design, rectangular, no lights, no emissions, just drifting. But there, what are we supposed to do? Thoric whispered to his superior, a grizzled veteran named Shun. Shun didn't respond. He just stared at the shimmer for a long, cold minute, then said something no one expected. Hope they don't notice us. Above them, on a dozen bridges across the fleet, command officers argued, calculated. Panicked, Crickle finally broke silence. On open fleet comms, all units brace for possible engagement. Human vessel detected, stand by for priority. Contingency code. The signal cut out. Static, then a new signal took its place. It was audio only, no identifier, no encryption, just one line spoken in Terran standard with a slow, gravel, thick voice. You forgot about us, and the entire comnet exploded into noise. Officers screaming, pilots scrambling. Some ships powered shields, others began activating jump drives, aborting missions. The human ship hadn't fired a single shot, it hadn't even moved, but across 3,000 alien warships, the one thing no one wanted to admit was now a screaming truth. They were terrified, not of a fleet, not of a super weapon, but of a single ship, and worse, what might still be inside it. You could feel it in the hull, not vibrations, not Movement dread, a low crawling sensation like your bones were about to shatter, except nothing touched you, no impact, no force, just the awareness of something being wrong. Thoric stood, frozen by the viewport as the dark mass of the human vessel slowly grew larger. In the distance, it hadn't moved, not even a nudge, and yet it felt closer, like it was staring back, like it had eyes and breath and hate. His superior Shun had gone silent, eyes distant, lips cracked open like he wanted to speak, but forgot how. The bridge of the Volcor had descended into a stifling hush, broken only by erratic beeping from consoles and the occasional hiss of shifting hydraulics. Commander Crixel was gone from the comms, gone from the bridge. Rumors were already spreading. He'd locked himself in his quarters, or maybe he'd done something worse. Other ships in the fleet were reacting. In chaos, one Zarnathi cruiser, the Jeller, had already jumped out of system, abandoning position without orders. Another, the Varn's Hook, fired a barrage of ion flares into space, bluffing perhaps, or trying to force the human ship to show its hand, but the human ship didn't respond. No shields, no weapons online, no shifting course. It just floated silent like a gravestone, and still somehow it held the attention of all 3,000 ships in the Zarnathi Armada. Thoric could hear snippets from open comm channels, other commanders screaming, ships asking for clarification, backup, evacuation. Someone said they were trying to ping the Terran vessel. Someone else said that was suicide. But then the voice came back, same gravel thick human voice from earlier, same dead calm. 3,000 ships and none of you knocked. First, the channel snapped off again. Shun suddenly moved. He pulled Tharic away from the window like he was shielding him from radiation. You don't look at it, he said, almost growling. You don't, but it's just a ship. Thoric stammered. No, Shun said, it's them, back in the old war. Humanity wasn't the largest fleet, not even close. The Zarnathi had 7 times their numbers. The triumvirate worlds had firepower that dwarfed the human naval capacities, and the Arlich Syndicate had stealth ships that made Terran scanners obsolete. But humanity fought differently. They didn't win by superior numbers, they won by turning the battlefield into a psychological meat grinder. They didn't just aim for military targets, they broke morale. They jammed systems with their own language coded in insults and psychological warfare. They hijacked communications, using voices of the dead to whisper into the ears of enemy pilots. They left Rex Booby trapped with recorded screams. They learned alien languages faster than expected, only to spit them back in mocking tones across every frequency. They pushed their own soldiers to extremes, giving them nicknames like Void Walkers and Laughers. They chemically suppressed fear. They were known to fly damaged ships on suicide runs, not for tactical advantage, but to prove they'd do it. It worked. Whole fleets abandoned regions without a fight, and when the Terran vanished from the war without explanation, nobody celebrated. They were just gone. And now here it was again, a single echo from a supposedly extinct war machine. The ship was old, everyone agreed on that. Probably pre-synthetic hull, no modern upgrades, no visible weapons array, but the signature was unmistakable. It was the Thanos, last seen at the Battle of Im's Cradle, officially destroyed. But even that was a lie, because no wreckage had ever been recovered. Fleet Admiral Zulker of the 7th Zarnathi Corps tried to rally the ships. His voice blasted through fleet comms with that same command tone he had built his career on. All vessels disengage from panic protocols. This is an outdated vessel, likely abandoned. We do not retreat from ghost stories. Confirm war readiness. Prepare to board. Tharic heard the words, so did Shun, so did the rest of the Vueller's bridge crew. But no one moved. Board it. No Zarnathi had set foot on a human warship since the end of the last war. The last known boarding operation had ended in 64. Bodies, all Zarathi found torn open from the inside. No signs of Tur on board. Just cameras, footage showing one man laughing into the lens before slamming his own head into a bulkhead repeatedly until his skull cracked. The ship had self-destructed before they could recover anything else, and now Zulker wanted to board the Thanos. Madness, but 2 vessels detached from the forward line, smaller, nimble reconnaissance craft, not heavily armed but fast enough to approach and escape if it came to that. One of them, the Zero Beta, made contact first. Second, the Orcolin 8 kept distance. Scanning. Open comms streamed their feeds to the Armada. Thoric and Shun watched from their console. The hull of the Thanos was covered in what looked like corrosion, but the scans didn't match any known decay. It wasn't rust. It was organic residue, like something had grown on the ship and died multiple times. The Zero Beta closed in. Still no response from the Terran ship. Then the recon pilot, a young female officer named Nari, activated docking clamps. Ship is unpowered, she said. No life forms detected. Initiating hull breach. Pause, then a click, then silence. Thoric leaned forward. Nothing. No response. Shun's lips tightened, then static, then a scream. No video, no footage, just a scream like something was clawing through Nari's throat. Wet gurgled. Then a voice, not hers, not human either, something between a growl and a whisper. Still watching. And then Zero Beta exploded. No weapon discharge, no warning, just gone. The Orcolin 8 spun away in panic, its pilot breathing heavy on comms. She didn't die in the blast, he said. I saw her face. She was already dead. The Arma reeled, and then it happened again. The voice broadcasting from the Thanos wideband to every ship, every deck, every bridge. Same voice, low, male, unshaken. You left the fire burning. We just walked back in. Admiral Zulker tried to give another order, but it was too late. 10 ships jumped out, then 20 more, then 50. Not coordinated. Panicked. Back on the Volcor, Crixel reappeared. On the bridge, eyes bloodshot. He was holding a small hollow emitter, shaking in his hand. He played the file without a word. It showed the last known footage from the Battle of M's Cradle. Human soldiers, what looked like only 30, storming a station holding 600 Zath defenders and winning. Not through tactics, not even through firepower, but fear. The humans didn't duck for cover. They screamed. They charged. One of them got set on fire and kept running. Another had both legs blown off and still crawled forward, laughing. When the station collapsed, the last audio file recorded from their unit was a man whispering into his comms, "You'll forget this day until we remind you." Crixel turned it off. The ship isn't alone, he said. The blinked. What? Crixel nodded slowly. It's a scout, a memory, a test. They want to see what we'll do What if we ignore it? Thoric asked. They'll come anyway. Shun spoke again for the first time in minutes. They never fight for territory or for resources. They fight when they're bored. Hours passed. The human ship never moved. And still the Armada bled itself. 1,000 ships gone now. Some jumped to safety, others detonated crews, mutinying to avoid capture by cycles. And less than 900 ships remained. Formation, and only one question remained. What did the Thanos want? It didn't attack, it didn't hail, it just existed. And that somehow was worse because it meant they were watching again. And this time they weren't coming to negotiate. They were coming to remind the galaxy why you don't ignore monsters just because they're quiet. By the 7th hour, silence had become more dangerous than war. There were no more messages from the Thanos, no more cryptic threats, no sudden explosions, no more screams from doomed recon teams. The ghost ship just sat there, motionless, cold, ancient, as though it had already delivered its message and was simply waiting to see what the Zarnathi Armada would do next. But that silence did something far worse than violence ever could. It made everyone start to turn on each other. The Vulkars bridge had fractured into 3 factions. Commander Crixel, who had finally re-emerged from his quarters, now stood isolated, his voice from shouting failed orders. The younger officers, the ones too young to remember the last war, were beginning to panic openly, whispering of mutiny, escape pods, or defecting to the Arlich Syndicate. And then there were the veterans like Shun, men who had seen what the humans did in the old war, who didn't panic because they already knew this was over. They had the dead look in their eyes, acceptance, the 1,000-year stare of soldiers who'd already made their peace. Thoric didn't know which side he was on. He just knew he wanted off the ship. The comms buzzed. Another transmission, this time from the Zarak Thorn, a long-range command vessel that had taken up a cautious observation position behind one of the fractured asteroid belts nearby. Admiral Zulker's voice came through again, but this time he didn't sound angry, he sounded small. We've attempted remote scans. Telemetry is corrupt. Visual data is degrading. Every automated drone that gets within 10 km of the Thanos malfunctions and sends back this. A moment later, Theek's console lit up. A video feed flickering black and white, distorted like it had passed through layers of interference. It showed the Thanos from a distant angle, but the shape was wrong. The hull seemed to pulse like it was breathing. Then something moved, not on the outside, from within. The ship was shifting, its panels flexing subtly, like muscles tensing under synthetic skin. It didn't have lights, but something inside it glowed, a slow red pulse like a dying heartbeat. And then the drone's feed cut to static. Zulker came back on. None of our scientists can explain it. We thought it was derelict. We were wrong. It's growing. No one spoke on the Vulkars bridge. Crickleel turned slowly to his crew. We've been trying to measure this thing, using our science, our logic, our rules. But it's not playing by them. They finally found his voice. What is it, sir? Crixel looked at him with something between horror and awe. I think it's not a ship anymore. In the mess halls and engine rooms of the remaining fleet, strange reports began spreading. Hallucinations. A pilot from the Zelverin classer reported seeing figures moving in his peripheral vision, figures in human naval uniforms just standing in the Corners, mouths open but not speaking. Another crew member claimed his own. Reflection mouthed different words then. He spoke when looking into a mirror. Someone else claimed to hear breathing. Inside the walls. Shun pulled Thoric aside privately after. The third such report came in. You ever hear of the Ghost Protocol? Thoric shook his head. Last war human psychological warfare doctrine. They'd send a ship ahead, cloaked, quiet, sometimes with no crew. It would drift into enemy systems and just exist. And in every hour it stayed there, the enemy would start to lose their minds. Ships would misfire, crews would turn on each other, officers would report seeing dead comrades, hearing voices. One fleet, an entire Arlich formation, ended up killing each other without the humans ever firing a shot. But how? Thoric asked, voice cracking. Shun's stare was cold. Doesn't matter because it worked. Thoric leaned in, whispering like even the air might be listening. So you're saying this ship, the Thanos, it's not here to fight? Shun's jaw tensed. No, it's here to watch us destroy ourselves. By the 9th hour, another 100 ships had abandoned the formation. Some drifted aimlessly. Others exploded during mutinies. One entire squadron, the 14th Drawer Line, attempted a mass surrender. They hailed the Thanos, requesting terms of peace. And the ship finally moved. It didn't speak. It didn't send back a message. It rotated just slightly, just enough to aim its front toward the 14th Drakkar line, and then every single ship in the squadron lost power. No blast, no energy weapon, they just died. Thoric watched the readouts on the fleet display. All systems flatlined, all life signs ceased. No debris, no escape pods, just floating tombs. Commander Crixel stood motionless, fists clenched. They tried to surrender, he said flatly. They tried to reason. The whispered, what does that mean? Crixel didn't look away from the screen. It means the humans don't want surrender. They don't want victory. They want obedience. At the 11th hour, someone broke. A young officer named Giron, barely older than Thoric, pulled a pulse pistol and shot his superior in the chest during an argument over escape protocol. He didn't try to run, didn't try to explain. He just dropped the weapon and stared at the floor. Don't you hear it? He mumbled. Hear what? Thoric asked. Giron looked up, eyes glassy, smile twisted. They're already inside. Crixel ordered him thrown into confinement, but the med officers already confirmed what everyone feared. Giron's brainwave activity was altered, like he'd been programmed, rewired. And then came the kicker. He wasn't the only one. Across 5 more ships, similar reports surfaced, officers speaking in strange phrases, pilots walking into airlocks, crew cutting power to shields, saying the lights must go out for them to arrive. It was becoming clear. The Thanos wasn't just a ship, it was a signal, a carrier, a weapon that attacked not with lasers or nukes but with ideas, and those ideas were spreading. Zolker made his final broadcast at the 12th hour. This fleet is lost. We're no longer in command. I advise all vessels with jump capability to scatter. Don't report home. Don't draw attention. Let this thing burn itself out. Then he detonated his own ship. No warning, just light. And then silence. The Vor didn't move. Crexel didn't give the order. Shun didn't ask for it because they all knew now any movement was a mistake. You jump away and they might follow. You engage and they'll break you. You try to Talk and they'll listen, but you won't. Like what they say. The human ship began transmitting again. Not audio this time, video, but it wasn't a threat, it was an old Earth. Broadcast grainy black and white. Man in a suit sitting behind a desk. Speaking into the camera. "Good evening," he said, "this is your reminder." The image flickered, cut to images of ancient battlefields, tanks, bombs. Fire, not alien, Earth's own wars, then. Newer ones, human soldiers boarding. Alien vessels, screaming, blood, panic. Then nothing, just one final message. Blinking in red text across every screen. "In the fleet, we were quiet, you forgot. We're awake now, and we remember everything." The first explosion didn't come from a human weapon, it came from inside the fleet, one of the mid-tier ships, the Raucous Elon, broke formation, spun its nose down and rammed full speed into the engine core of a battleship 3 times its size. No warning, no message. No justification, just a suicidal impact that tore both vessels in half. Before anyone could react, 4 more ships followed. By the time someone screamed into fleet comms, "They've infected the crews," it was already too late. Dozens of ships were turning on each other, some locked down their engines and self-destructed, others opened fire at nothing, venting atmosphere, killing their own, not under orders, not under logic, pure panic, pure madness. Thoric stared at the fleet screen on the Volker's bridge, eyes wide, hands cold and numb. The once proud formation of Zarnathi vessels had turned into a slaughterhouse. Ships spun out of control, weapons discharged indiscriminately. Flares and missile trails painted chaos into the stars. Some of them were attacking the Thanos, but most had no target at all. Status report, Crixel barked, trying to cling to command. No one responded. His voice no longer mattered. His rank was dust. Shun stood in front of the observation panel, arms folded behind his back. "I told you," he muttered, "they're not here to fight us, they're here to make us fight ourselves." "Why?" Thor asked, his voice cracked, the words barely coming out. "Why would they do this? What do they want?" Shun turned, expression unreadable. Vengeance, or maybe this is how they win, with silence, with terror, with reputation. He pointed at the screen. "That ship hasn't fired a single shot, but look what it's done. Look at us." Thoric did. Out of the original 3,000 ships, barely 400 remained operational. The rest were dead in space, destroyed, drifting, or abandoned, and the human ship still unmoved, still cold. But now something was coming out of it, not weapons, pods. Small, cylindrical, silent, at least 50. They drifted away from the Thanos. Directionless, unpowered, like debris. But Crixel understood what was happening. "Boarding units," he whispered. "They're sending boarding units." A tactical officer tried to scan them. The system crashed. A different officer tried to shoot them down. "Weapons control locked." "No," Shun said flatly. "We're not jamming, they are, and not with tech." "What then?" Shun gave him look that made the stomach twist. "With presence." The pods floated past the perimeter. Ships like ghosts, no shields activated. No defense systems engaged, as if every ship's AI simply refused to acknowledge them. Then one by one they attached. Not with clamps, not with magnetic tethers, they sank into the hulls. Merged like cancer. And then the real horror began. Screams filled the internal comms, not from one ship, from dozens. Something's on board. They came through the walls, they're not human, they're something else, and beneath the screaming, laughter slow. Hollow, male voices chuckling in the background of death. And then the voices began speaking in Zarnathi. You forgot the sound of your own fear. We died in the dark, now you will too. What you fear is not what we are, it's what we're becoming. Reports poured in, the boarding units weren't just human soldiers, they were altered. One surviving crewman broadcasting from a crippled cruiser described them as wearing their own deaths, suits covered in bone, helmets designed to look like skulls, no visors, just glass painted black so no one could see their faces. And they didn't shoot, they didn't shout, they just walked down the halls, slow, methodical, tearing through Zarnathi flesh like paper, one by one. The ships went dark. Thoric turned to Shun, whispering, they're not soldiers anymore. No, Shun agreed, they're symbols. The Vor was next. The proximity alarm shrieked as one of the pods, silent and silver, latched onto the port side. The felt his lungs freeze. The same cold tension from earlier returned, like something ancient had reached out through the void and touched the back of his neck. Crickle ran toward weapons control, seal every deck, power internal defenses. But nothing worked, turrets failed to deploy, hull bridge shutters jammed. The AI spoke once, then went silent, then the lights died and the laughter began. The ran not out of cowardice, out of instinct. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't even brave, he was alive, and that was the only thing that mattered now. Shun followed close behind him, pulse pistol drawn, checking every corridor. Where are we going? Thoric gasped. Escape pods, Shun said, assuming they haven't shut them down. The hallways of the Vueler were filled with shadows now, deeper than any darkness a power failure should cause. They moved like liquid, like smoke, like something watching. Crew laid dead across the floors. Some hadn't even been touched. They died from fear, heart failure, seizures. Others had scratched their own faces off. Thoric turned a corner and stopped short. A figure stood in the next hallway, tall, human silhouette, helmet like a skull, armor that looked grown, not forged, no weapon in its hands, just standing, breathing. It didn't move toward him, it didn't speak, it just watched. Shun raised his pistol, but it jammed. They pulled him back. Go, Shun growled. Now they ran. Behind them the figure didn't follow. It didn't need to. At the escape bay they found one pod, functional barely. Thoric jumped in. Shu hesitated. This won't help, he said. If they want us, they'll find us wherever we go. Then why run? Thoric asked. Because maybe that's the point, Shun said, stepping in. They want us to carry the message. They want someone to survive, to warn others. Shun shook his head. No. To spread fear. The pod launched and behind them the Vueler died from orbit. Theek looked down at the broken fleet. Less than 100 ships remained, most of them crippled, others possessed, and in the middle of it all the Thanos began to move, just slightly, just enough to point itself outward, toward the nearest wormhole gate, toward the next system. The message was clear. We're back, we're coming, and this time we're not stopping. The escape pod coasted silently through the cold void of the tarry drift, its interior soaked in the quiet hum of failing systems and the shallow, haunted breathing of two survivors. Thoric sat strapped into his seat, blood crusting the side of his face from an earlier fall. His eyes Wide, unmoving, not blinking. He hadn't spoken in 20 minutes, not since the Volker vanished behind them in a flash of silent death. Shun sat across from him, holding a data slate in one hand, a pulse pistol in the other. He was older, but somehow less shaken, or maybe just used to it. He'd seen death before, real death, not the clean kind, the kind that sticks in your lungs and rewires your soul. Navigation shot, Shun finally said, voice low. Pods drifting on backup trajectory toward Yara's belt station. If it's still there. The blinked once. They didn't follow us, he said, almost as if disappointed. Shun didn't answer right away. They don't need to. That silence returned. Not a peaceful silence, the kind that presses on your chest like a slow poison, the kind that makes you feel watched even when alone. Theric finally found his voice again. Are they even human anymore? Shun looked up, and for a long moment he didn't look like a soldier. He looked like a man about to admit something terrible. No, he said, not like us, not like anything. The shook his head. But what are they? Shun leaned back, tapping the pulse pistol against his thigh. You ever hear of Project Oblivion? No, classified human operation last war. Named Dark Latch. The idea was simple. If humanity ever faced extinction, they'd send one final fleet, one last silent vanguard. Untraceable, undetectable, no diplomats. No surrender, no prisoners. Just ghosts. The Thanos was the first prototype, Shun confirmed. They said it was destroyed at Envir's cradle, but that was a lie. It disappeared, went dark, and the galaxy assumed they'd lost control of it. But they didn't. No, they finished it, perfected it, and then they waited. Waited for what? Shun's eyes locked onto Vax. For us to forget. The looked away. He didn't want to believe it, couldn't, but the way those soldiers moved, their silence, their patience, their surgical cruelty, it wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge. It was method, calculated, engineered. The worst part, it had worked. The escape pod limped its way toward Yara's belt station, weaving through the crumbling remains of asteroid fragments and abandoned mining platforms. The station was visible from a distance, still powered, but dark. No ships in orbit, no transmissions. Too quiet. Shun guided the pod manually the last few kilometers and docked with one of the external airlocks. They boarded with weapons drawn, not because they expected humans, because now anything that moved felt like a threat. Yaris was empty, not destroyed, just abandoned. Lights flickered in slow pulses. Monitors blinked with corrupted feeds. The air recyclers still functioned, and gravity was stable, but there were no signs of life. They passed through the commerce deck, where stalls once bustled with alien traders, now rotting in silence. Food half-eaten, drinks tipped over, cards scattered on tables where no hands remained. It happened here, Thoric whispered. Shun nodded. Maybe a pod made it, maybe just one, that's all it takes. They reached the central command hub. Shun pulled up the last station logs. Broadcast logs, internal security footage, sensor data, all corrupted. Except one file, a short video, no metadata, no timestamp. Shun played it. The screen showed a hallway familiar from earlier in the war. An officer stood alone facing the camera, mouth twitching, eyes bloodshot. He looked Zarnathi, but changed. Off, he spoke in Terran standard. They don't speak, they don't sleep, they don't stop. They remember what we forgot. They weren't just made for war. They were made for what comes after. The screen went black, and then the station lights died. The ensuing froze, no hum, no flicker. Just silence. Then movement, a sound down the corridor, not heavy, not stomping, bare. Feet slapping softly against metal. Shun raised his pistol, gripped the wall. Breath stuck in his throat. The sound came closer, then stopped, and a voice, male, gravel-worn, cold, spoke in Terran. Again, you ran far, you survived. That makes you useful. Thoric trembled. The voice was close on. The other side of the corridor spread. The fear, let them know we're not back for peace, we're back for balance. Shun fired, pulse rounds lit the hallway, no hit, just an empty corridor. But the voice remained. In their heads, not through the speakers in their heads. They left the station as fast as they could. Shun manually forced an emergency beacon to activate on launch. Abroad. Frequency broadcast set to loop 1. Message. Human warship sighted. Multiple confirmed. Hostile contacts. Do not engage. Do not approach. They are not who they were. The pod pushed deeper into the Yaris sector, headed for the only functioning outpost left in the quadrant, Port Salve, an independent trade station built by a neutral cartel of non-aligned worlds. The place didn't take sides. If there was a system left in the galaxy that would listen to reason, it was there, or so they thought. 3 days passed. The journey was long. Long enough for Thuric to stop flinching at every sound. Long enough for his thoughts to return, and long enough for him to start dreaming, and the dreams weren't his. He dreamed of bone-armored soldiers walking across ice-covered cities, of children crying in tunnels, of ships screaming in binary, of Earth cracked open like an egg, of laughter in the dark. Shun didn't sleep. When they finally reached Port Salvox, the place was buzzing with activity. Ships from across the quadrant were docked, freighters, smugglers, patrol vessels, even old war aircruisers. News had spread, but not the truth. As Thoric and Shun stepped off the pod and into the registration hall, they could already hear the rumors. A rogue AI ship, probably malfunctioning. Some backwater system hyping up ghost stories, old Terran tech drifting around. Big deal. No one understood. Not yet. Shun stormed into the Central Council chamber, guns holstered, data slate in hand. He slammed it on the table. This isn't a myth. We were there. We saw it. We barely escaped. The Council, a mix of species from different trade syndicates, looked unimpressed. You're telling us a single human ship did all this? One asked. It wasn't the ship that said. It was what came out of it. They're not human anymore, Shu growled. There's something else. Something made in war, but evolved in silence. You expect us to panic over one ship? Thoric stepped forward. His voice was low, sharp, cold. No, I expect you to panic over the fact that it's not alone. The room went quiet. Shun tapped a command into the slate, projected into the center of the chamber was a fleet schematic, not of the Thanos, of a network, 6 known human ghost ships from the last war, once thought lost, all missing, all unaccounted for. And then a new signal, live blinking, coming from the outer rim of the station's own sector. Human frequency undeniable, and it was moving toward them. One council member stood. Evacuate the station now. Another screamed into the intercoms. Port Salve descended into chaos in under 10 minutes. The stood by a viewport watching, waiting. And then he saw it, just a speck at first, then clearer, a familiar shape. The Thanos, still cracked, still dark, still breathing, and behind it too. More, same design, same silence, same purpose. The fleet wasn't just awake, it was coming home. Port Salve was never meant for war. It had no heavy cannons, no dreadnought-class defenses, no trained military personnel, just merchant vessels, smugglers, traders, and aging private security crews hired more for crowd control than battle. But now, as 3 human ghost ships emerged from the black ink, silent gods drifting on wings of steel and sorrow, even the greediest black market smugglers started praying to things they didn't believe in. Thanos led the formation, its broken hull somehow more menacing than any pristine warship. Its 2 siblings, the Persian Edge and Oblivion Veil, followed in slow unison. No formation markers, no comms, no escorts, just quiet, suffocating intent. Inside Port Salve's control center, Sean and Thurk stood behind the central viewport as alarms blared across every deck. The emergency evacuation lights cast long red shadows on everyone's faces. They didn't even change course, the chief controller muttered, hands trembling. They didn't respond to hails, they just arrived. That's how they work, Shun growled. They don't come to talk, they come to watch what you do when the knife is already against your throat. Thoric couldn't take his eyes off the display. Why here? This isn't military, this isn't strategic, there's nothing worth taking. Shun looked at him with grim understanding. They're not taking anything. A pause. They're leaving something behind. 300 escape shuttles launched in the first hour. The wealthiest syndicates were already gone, vanishing into hyperspace, while the rest of the station devolved into madness. Civilians packed into cargo bays like livestock, trampling each other for a chance to get off the station. Still many stayed, out of fear, out of pride, out of doubt. Some just didn't believe it, and that's exactly what the ghosts were waiting for. The Thanos stopped its approach just outside the station's defense perimeter. Its lights flickered once, then died, and then something launched. Pods, not metallic, not machines, organic. They pulsed like hearts, gliding through the vacuum toward Port Salvox like drifting jellyfish. Their surface shimmered with membranes instead of armor, and where they struck the hull, they melted in. Security forces responded immediately. They sent drones to intercept. None returned. They fired anti-boarding flak. The pods dodged in impossible patterns, not by speed but by knowing where the shots would land. Get me visuals on impact points, the control chief screamed, but the feeds went black across 6 decks. The same message began repeating over the intercom in a slow, whispering human voice. The future does not come in war, it comes in silence. We do not conquer, we convert. Theric and Shun rushed to one of the security checkpoints. The guards had sealed the blast doors, unsure whether to engage or hide. Then came the first transmission from within. Camera feeds blinked to life. They showed the halls. Figures walked them. But these weren't bone-armored soldiers. Like before, they looked human. Unarmored, unarmed, dressed in simple gray robes with black bands around their eyes. They walked slowly, peacefully. No weapons, no urgency. One turned to a camera and smiled. Then the feed died. What the hell is this? Thrick asked. Shun's jaw locked tight. It's the next Phase, what face? He didn't answer. Then they heard the screams, but not the screams of dying, the screams of changing. Deep inside Deck 3, the boarding parties weren't killing, they were touching anyone they reached. Anyone who didn't resist violently was marked, a simple hand on the face, whisper in the ear, and then they changed, physically, biologically, flesh shifting, mind slowing, eyes turning gray, their voices dulled to whispers. They didn't fight. They didn't speak, they just followed. Converted one by one, Thoric watched the security feeds in horror as crew members transformed in seconds. A Zarnathi female clutched her chest, screamed as her fingers elongated, bones reshaping. Her scream twisted into a laugh. A mechanical, hollow human laugh. She rose calmly and walked to the next person. Then did the same. Stop them, Thoric whispered. We have to stop them. Shun turned away from the screen. You can't kill ideas. The truth hit the like a shipwreck. They weren't an army anymore. They weren't even invaders. They were a virus, a mimetic psychological and biological weapon engineered not just to terrify but to replace. This wasn't about war. This was about eraser, not of species, but of identity. Thoric and Shuen joined a group of armed smugglers barricaded near the cargo lift. There was no chain of command anymore, just people who didn't want to become whatever the hell was taking over the rest of the station. What do we do? Someone asked. Fight them. Shun shook his head. You can't fight what you can't understand. Then run. They let you run. What? Thoric spoke now, his voice cold and certain. They're not trying to chase us. They're trying to send us out like infected blood. You saying we're carriers? Shun nodded. Fear is the first vector. The rest comes later. Then what? What's their end game? They turned to him and said the one thing no one else wanted to admit. They want to make us like them. On Deck 7, something new happened. A figure emerged, not armored, not faceless. He looked human completely. Gray eyes, pale skin, thin smile, short hair. He stepped into the promenade like a man arriving at a dinner party. People froze, some pointed weapons. He didn't flinch. He held up his hands. I'm not here to harm you. His voice wasn't threatening, it was inviting. Soft, even kind. I'm here to help you survive. One of the smugglers fired. The shot hit the man the chest. He staggered, looked down, laughed quietly. I understand. Then his body peeled open like paper, folding wrong, and what came out wasn't a man. It wasn't anything that had ever been alive. Back in the command center, Shun watched the conversion rates tick higher. He tapped into long-range comms, began transmitting across every known frequency. Thoric stood beside him, watching the message go live. This is a warning, Shun said. If you hear this, do not come to Port Salve. Do not send fleets. Do not send aid. Burn this location from your records. Do not remember it. Do not say its name. He paused, then added, we failed to forget, and now they've remembered us. Outside the station, the three ghost ships remained idle, like gods watching a temple burn, but the Thanus had opened a port, and from it more pods began to grow, thousands like seeds, spreading into the dark, each one carrying not soldiers but invitations. They were down to 6 now, 6 living, breathing, unaltered souls clinging to the shattered edge of the cargo level. Beneath Port Salve's broken reactor core, Thoric leaned against the cold metal wall, his pulse weapon low on charge, his shirt soaked in blood, none of it His, but that didn't matter anymore. Blood was just a color now, a warning. Sign that someone had been close to them. Shun stood near the flickering interface panel, trying to reroute power to the blast doors. His fingers moved with method, but Thoric could see it in his eyes, the exhaustion, the knowing, the slow acceptance. You hear that? Thoric asked, voice thin. Shun paused. He did, not footsteps, not alarms, singing distant, hollow, beautiful voices in unison like a choir, buried in the walls, humming a human lullaby none of the Zarnathi had ever learned. They're getting closer, Shun nodded. It's a signal, a pacification layer. What? Shun sighed. Before the transformation becomes physical, they sedate the mind. The music slows cognition, dulls threat response, makes the fear easier to replace with obedience. You're saying it's part of the process? Shun didn't answer. He didn't need to. Of the 6 survivors in the corridor, one, a Yaran mercenary named Talk, had begun muttering nonsense 2 hours ago. He'd stopped blinking, stopped reacting. His skin had gone pale and cold, but he wasn't dead. He sat in the corner now, humming the song, not quite in rhythm, but close. Do we put him down? Asked Ra, one of the few remaining smugglers. A lean, sharp-tongued female with more scars than credits to her name. Shun looked at Thoric. Thoric looked at Talk, and then back. No, Thoric said, voice low. If they wanted us dead, he'd be gone already. They're leaving him like that to make us watch. Talk smiled, then spoke. His voice was not his own. They don't want to kill you. They want to teach you how to stop being afraid. Then he stood, walked into the nearest vent and disappeared. No one chased him. Back in the remnants of the station's central database room, Shun managed to slice into the inner layer of the Thanos' transmitted signal. Most systems had crashed under exposure to its psychic echo, but a few backup nodes remained active, and that was when they saw it, a map, a network, a grid, dozens of systems marked in red, not attacked, not destroyed, converted. Thoric stared at the growing list of systems with Dread, Gorth Prime, Illy Station, Ferdin's Belt, Jura Colony, Outer Worlds Research Hub, 17B. None of them had reported back. None had called for help. They'd been silenced. What are they building? Thoric whispered. Shun tapped through the transmission logs, and there it was, a final file, corrupted, fragmented, but legible, a message from the old war. Human log, audio only, a voice like rusted iron and sorrow whispering. Project Oblivion, termination was never the goal. The war taught us that species survive not by force but by assimilation. Memory, identity, autonomy, these are viruses. The cure is unity. We will show them the peace that exists when fear is no longer an option. The universe will not be conquered, it will be corrected. Ra stood behind them, pale, wittied. That's what this is, correction. Shuen nodded grimly. No more empires, no more wars, no more resistance, just sameness. Thoric clenched his fists. They're turning the galaxy into themselves. Worse, Shun said. They're turning it into a mirror. The singing grew louder. Decks above collapsed one by one, not from explosions. Those had long since ended. The structure wasn't being destroyed. It was being reshaped. Organic matter fused with metal. Lights pulsed in biological rhythms. Vents, breath, mist that smelled like Earth's oxygen. Surveillance systems began humming human lullabibus. The station was becoming a Human structure, but not the kind built in shipyards, a living machine, a womb. Then it happened, from the core access elevator a figure stepped out, tall, clean, not armored, not grotesque. Familiar, he looked exactly like him, same face, same eyes, same scar. Except his irises were steel gray, and his smile, endless. "Don't be afraid," the duplicate said. "We've made you better." The raised weapon his hand shook, Shu whispered. "Don't shoot, that's not meant to fight." "What is it, a choice?" The double walked closer. "You can live in fear," he said. "Calm or live in clarity, your pain ends. The moment you accept it, we don't end. You Thoric, we set you free, free from." "What?" The double leaned in. "From yourself." Thoric fired, the bolt passed through the figure. It wasn't real, just light, a projection. It laughed. "I understand. Fear is persistent, but it's not permanent." And then it vanished. Behind the walls, movement began. Hundreds of new forms, some human, some not, all walking, chanting, humming. "You said they were ships," Ra whispered. "But they're not ships, not anymore." Shun turned to her, eyes heavy. "They're cedars. Each one carries the strain, the memory, the voice." The real realized it then, the Thanos, the Oblivion Veil, the others. They weren't ghost ships, they were carriers of a human idea so corrupted, so purified by the fire of war that it had replaced biology itself, not evolution, not religion. A new truth burned into the cortex, fear overcome, identity erased, obedience total, not from control but from want, because after enough fear, enough trauma, enough war, peace becomes seductive, even if it means losing everything, even if it means no longer being who or what you are. The team fell back to the last functioning escape ship in Dock 3. Merchant freighter, half fueled and barely operational. Shun made the call. Launch blind, no destination, no calculated path. Just away. Thoric hesitated, staring back at the changing station as the ship launched. Behind him, port salve. Not with fire, with light, warm, pulsing, peaceful, and the singing. It followed them into space, through the walls, into their sleep, not loud, just there, as if something was gently asking them, "Why fight what you already are?" The freighter limped through deep space, its hull cracked, fuel cells flickering, and comm systems overwhelmed by radiation and corrupted frequencies. It wasn't supposed to fly this far, just a merchant hauler stripped down for local cargo routes, but right now it was their only lifeline. Thoric sat in the forward observation seat, staring into the endless dark. He hadn't spoken in hours, not since port Salvox faded from view, receding into nothing, lit up like a distant sun, a peaceful sun. But he couldn't forget the song. It still played in his mind, soft, warm, comforting. That's what scared him the most. Shun stood behind him, working at a maintenance panel with slow, tired finger. The old soldier's hands trembled, not from fear but from knowing he might have made it out just to die later. "We need to transmit the warning," Shun muttered, "even if it doesn't save anyone." Theric turned his head. "Transmit it where? Every system with a name is either silent or singing." "We find a place without a name," Shun said. "Out on the fringe, a colony too remote to be worth their time. Maybe someone out there is still stubborn enough to fight." "Fight what?" The asked bitterly. "Fear, memory, peace. You don't kill an idea, Shun, you surrender to it or you die resisting it alone." Shun met his eyes. Then we die human. A few decks below, Ra was dying slowly. Quietly, her breath came in wheezes now. Lungs scarred from exposure to the bafog. Released during the station's fall, she hadn't told anyone at first. She'd fought through it, pushed herself too hard until she collapsed in the cargo hold, coughing blood and whispering parts of the song. Thoric sat with her now, kneeling beside the cot, watching her fade. "Don't let it take me," she whispered. "You're not going to die," he lied. She smiled. "I already did back there on deck 7 when I watched that boy smile as his skin peeled off and he thanked them." She gripped his arm, suddenly strong. "I'm not afraid of dying," she said. "I'm afraid of forgetting why I was afraid." Then her hand fell limp and her lips parted to sing one final time, but no sound came. Just a breath. Then nothing. The help Shun place her body into the disposal chute. They didn't have the energy to give her a proper ceremony. The dead were piling up across every system. What difference would one more body make? But it mattered to them, because it meant she hadn't joined. She hadn't smiled that awful peaceful smile. "Not yet. Someone has to know," Thoric said. "Someone out there, someone still listening." Shun nodded and activated the last long-range emergency beacon, a pulse-coded, a half-dead dialect of Zarnathi military signal, something that only D-print colonies might still pick up if they were watching. Warning: human fleet, non-hostile, non-negotiable engagement, conversion, total loss of self, do not approach. Fear is not the enemy, fear is the last defense. Then he sent it out into the void. Maybe no one would hear it, but it was the last truth he had left to give. 3 days passed, no ships, no signals. Just that song still faint in the background. Sometimes the herded in the engine hum, other times in the way the lights flickered, even in the rhythm of his own heartbeat. He wanted to scream, to cut it out of himself, to rip the memory away. But Shun stopped him. "You're still yourself," he said. "As long as you hate it, you're still human." "But what happens when I stop hating it?" Shun didn't answer, because that's the question no one wanted the answer to. On the 5th day, a signal pinged back. Not a human one, not Zarnathi either. Something older, primitive, a backwater colony in the Cryon Reach, unaligned. "Forgotten," they responded with 6 words. "We see it too, come quickly." That was it. Coordinates followed. The 2 remaining men adjusted course. Cryon Reach wasn't a place you visited. It was a place you ended up. Low radiation, no trade, just dust, ice, and old mining outposts. And now refuge. When they arrived, the colony wasn't much, just a string of domes stitched together by glass corridors and buried generators. Maybe 200 people total, most of them born there, never left, never needed to. Until now. Thar and Shun were escorted to the main biodome. There were no weapons, no uniforms, just faces, tired, weathered, but not yet singing. The colony head was a woman named Myra, aged, sharpied, unafraid. "We've been watching the stars darken," she said, "one system at a time, lights blinking out, traders vanishing, messages repeating the same words." "You understand what's happening?" Shun asked. Myra nodded. "We do. We always knew they'd come back." Thark frowned. "Then why aren't you running?" "Because we've seen what running leads to," she said calmly. "Fear may delay them, but it doesn't stop them, and we won't be reshaped, not here." Shun narrowed his eyes. "You think you Can fight them, Mara smiled. No, but we can remember. She led them down into the old mines, deep below the colony. And there they found it, an old wreck, human from the First War, not a ship, just a drop pod. Crashed, rotted, sealed in ice, and inside one body, long dead, preserved. And smiling, Myra stood beside it. This was their first scout, she said. He came before the Thanos, before the silence. We found him, studied him, dissected what he became, and Thoric asked he wasn't human anymore, not even close. His DNA had rewritten itself. Using psychic exposure, emotional trauma, somehow they turned fear into code, a weapon that rewrites flesh and thought alike. Shun stared at the body. Then we were doomed from the beginning. Myra shook her head. No, not doomed. Just unprepared. Then she pulled back a sheet, revealing a chamber. Inside it, another same face. Same structure, but lifeless, empty. We've been working on resistance, Mara said, not military, cognitive. We found ways to block the conversion sequence. It doesn't cure the infection, but it slows it, resists it. You're making clones, the asked, horrified. No, we're making mirrors. She looked at him. You've seen them copy you, the face, the voice. But what happens when they look into a mirror and see something looking back? That won't change. Shun stepped forward. You want to fight them with themselves? Mira nodded. They evolved fear into peace. We're going to evolve peace into defiance. Later that night, they stood under the dome's transparent roof, watching the stars. He saw it again, faint, distant. A glimmer of light that pulsed once, then went dark. Another system gone. Another world corrected. But here the song was fading. He could still feel it in his chest, but it didn't control him. Not anymore. He looked at his own reflection in the glass, then whispered, "We remember," and that's when it finally stopped. 4 years later, the galactic map is smaller now. Half of it glows red, the other half glows white, and a tiny flicker remains blue. Cryon reach, unconverted, unbroken, but watched, always watched. Some say the humans don't attack it because they know what's brewing there. Others say they're waiting to see what happens when the virus meets resistance. No one knows what the humans are anymore, but they left one last message broadcast across all channels in every language, every dialect, in one voice. We are not at war, we are at peace, but peace, like you, can be improved. The future no longer belongs to empires. It belongs to ideas, and in the darkness between stars, one final war is beginning.